Oh.
It is a lovely cue, though, for when it's actually okay to start. Like when you've finally pushed all of the buttons and folks start coming in, as I'm watching our participant number rise.
They should get Ian. They should get Ian McKellen to record that.
Yes. Or Ian Holm.
I was so lucky for my
Either
30th birthday. My sister took me to see Waiting for Godot, starring Ian McKellen and Patrick Stewart.
Oh, golly gee.
And
perfect.
It was as amazing as you think it is. It was. It was just, yeah.
Wonderful. Well, on that note, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining Country Bookshelf for Chaotic Storytime with Christopher Paolini and friends, Ryka Aoki, Christopher Buehlman, and Cat Rambo. We're so excited tonight to go on a storytelling quest into Paolini's world of the Fractalverse. Before we get started, I've got a few things. I'm Jessica from the Country Bookshelf in Bozeman, Montana, and we are on the ancestral unceded land of the Apsalaki Crow, Kootenai, Bitterroot Salish, Cheyenne, Shoshone Bannock, Achady Shakoan, Kalispel Pend Oreille, South Piikani, Northern Cheyenne, Chippewa Cree, Assiniboine, Aani Gravant, and Dakota peoples, among many others. We encourage those of you joining us from outside Bozeman in Montana to learn more about the land that you occupy and the stories of its peoples. As you can see in our chat, we do encourage you to sign up for our email newsletter so you can stay up to date on all the fun things that are happening at Country Bookshelf, and follow us on Eventbrite to register for more great upcoming events. Including next week, we will be chatting with the essayist Amy Leach for her new book. Before we gather around the ether tonight, I do want to share a few other things about our virtual space. You can purchase a copy of To Sleep in a Sea of Stars, Light from Uncommon Stars, Blacktongue Thief, and You Sexy Thing, which we get to officially put on the shelves tomorrow. So happy book birthday, Cat. By visiting countrybookshelf.com. Links will be appearing in the chat as we go through the evening. And I also would encourage you to check out our digital audiobook partner, Libro FM. They have all of these books, and many of our booksellers have already listened to them and loved that experience of the story as well. So those links will be appearing in the chat as we go through. We are recording tonight's event, and it will be viewable a little later this evening on the Country Bookshelf YouTube channel. And it's also live streaming there now. So if you are having connectivity issues, I do recommend first exiting and re-entering the webinar. If that doesn't work, go search for us on YouTube. You should find us there. If you have questions for any of our authors, you can leave them at any time. Just click the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen, and we'll get to them at the end as time allows. And finally, if you are having trouble with sound, usually headphones will fix it, or that exit and re-enter problem. So I do want to remind everyone, this is our shared creative space, and we want it to remain safe for everyone that's joined us today. Offensive or inappropriate comments will see the user dismissed from the space. So with all of that out of the way, I am so delighted to introduce our four authors that will be delighting us, maybe terrifying us as we go through chaotic story time tonight. Christopher Paolini was born in Southern California and has lived most of his life in Paradise Valley, Montana. He published his first novel, Eragon, in 2003 at the ripe age of 19, and quickly became a publishing phenomenon. His inheritance cycle, Eragon and its three sequels, have sold nearly 40 million copies worldwide. And To Sleep in a Sea of Stars is his first adult novel. We do still have one tiny hardcover hanging out at Country Bookshelf, as well as signed paperback copies. If you haven't purchased your copy, there's a link in the chat to do that. Ryka Aoki is a poet, composer, teacher, and novelist whose books include Hehele Ahilo and 2 Lambda Award finalists, Seasonal Velocities and Why Dust Shall Never Settle Upon This Soul. Ryka's work has appeared or been recognized in publications including Vogue, Elle, Bustle, Autostraddle, Pop Sugar, and BuzzFeed. Her poetry was featured at the Smithsonian Asian Pacific American Center, and she was honored by the California State Senate for extraordinary commitment to the visibility and well-being of transgender people. Thank you, Ryka. Christopher Buehlman has spent the last 30 years performing on the Renaissance Festival circuit, playing professional insulters, Spanish ambassadors, and medieval kings, writing shows about bastard monks, minotaurs, and playwright Christopher Marlowe. He's the author of 5 horror novels, including Those Across the River and Between Two Fires. His teleplay, The Man in the Suitcase, aired on Shudder's reboot of The Creep Show in 2019. He and his wife, an aerial silk artist, winter in their Ohio cabin when not touring Renaissance festivals or fairs. His latest novel, The Blacktongue Thief, begins a new adventure trilogy with Tor and is his fantasy debut. Cat Rambo is an American fantasy and science fiction writer whose work has appeared in, among others, Asimov's Weird Tales, Chiaroscuro, Table Bones, and Strange Horizons. A graduate of the Johns Hopkins Writing Seminars, where'd it go? Where they studied with John Barth and Steve Dixon. They also attended the Clarion West Writers Workshop. They are currently the managing editor of Fantasy Magazine, and they published, not anymore.
I think that's a very old bio that might have surfaced, because
Tor.
Yeah. That's like 10 years ago. Sorry.
Sneaky. No, thank you. They've also published a collection of stories, Eyes Like Sky and Coal and Moonlight, and their collaboration with Jeff Vandermeer, The Surgeon's Tale, and Other Stories appeared in 2007. They live and write in Washington State, and Cat Rambo is their real name. And as I mentioned, you can see behind me a few of our copies of You Sexy Thing that we get to put on the shelf tomorrow. So if you want it bright and early, first thing tomorrow morning, you can order it with those links in the chat. But without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to you guys. I'll be back a little later to share some questions from our audience. Take it away.
Well, thank you for that awesome introduction, and thank you to everyone who's watching, and thank you to my fellow authors for participating today in what is most assuredly going to be barely controlled chaos. So, is everyone ready to start?
Yes.
Yeah, I think so.
Let's do
All
this.
right.
Yeah.
All right. Do we have a preferred order of operation here? Does anyone want to go first, or shall I just pick at random?
You pick.
Me? All right. I will pick that. All right. So here is the setting. Here is the writing prompt, so to speak. You are on a spaceship. You are waking up in a cryotube. The lid of the tube cracks open. You hear a hiss of escaping gas. You feel yourself returning to awareness as life floods back into your chilled limbs. You perhaps feel a touch of nausea as because you've been in cryosleep for so long. You see the lights flickering on in the rest of the spaceship as the other crew members are awakening also. What should be a familiar scene, and yet, in your right hand, you see that you are holding what can only be an alien artifact. And you don't know how it got there. Cat, all yours.
Well, I look around, taking a deep breath of the ship air, smelling the familiar smells of disinfectant and that sweat you can never quite get out. And I looking around at my other fellow passengers and noticing that I seem to be waking up a little bit before them, unaccountably. I look down at the alien device, and I don't really want them to know that I have it, because they'll think I'm collaborating with the jellies. This is terrible. So I look around and find a place to put it. Can I now toss it to Ryka? I don't know how we're supposed to do this. Can I just toss to Ryka?
Toss to me, okay. I try to toss it, but somehow my hand won't let go. I can feel the tendrils. Something in the device is opened up and has somehow interfaced with my hand, and I have never had anything like this happened before, and I'm trying to toss it, and it starts to throb, and my arm is beginning to move on its own, and my arm is beginning to feel strangely electric in a way that I know is wrong, and yet it feels like something that's becoming more and more a part of me. And I don't like this feeling, but my hand is changing. And then off to Chris. Chris.
My hand is changing into a tentacle, and the tentacle, I use it to press what I now see as a button on this device. It is sort of like a staff with a what could only be a screen on it. And as my tentacle hand touches it, a voice comes from it, and it says, "Thank you for activating the speech recognition and translation rod. We are going to be boarding your ship in approximately 10 minutes. Please prepare your other crewmates to receive us."
Ooh, so right and yet so wrong.
So is that going to me, or are you playing along, Mr. Paolini?
Well, I have the job of occasionally giving you some challenges along the way. So I'm gonna let this next
okay.
round. I'm gonna let this next round go one more time, and then we will have a challenge. I will say, actually, I'll give you a challenge for this next round. The challenge is simple: see if you can include a pun.
Oh God, no pressure. So looking around as my tentacle sort of undulates in the air, and I noticed that a couple of crew members, people who used to be, they're good friends of mine, and they're looking at me strangely in a way they never had before. My attention's divided between that and the strange feeling of this tentacle taking over my body, and intense worry about the aliens about to invade our craft. I look around and I say, I need someone to chop this tentacle off. There's aliens coming, and I sort of devolve into incoherency and babble and relaxing into a bit, and somewhat irresponsibly, and look to see how my crewmates are reacting.
Before anyone can come to your aid, the ship pig, Runcible, trots up to you and gives you a rather alarmed sniff before running off to another one of the crew members. Ryka, all yours.
And so I see Runcible running off, and I think about the last time since Runcible and I spooned, and it's and I am telling I'm telling them to please cut off my arm, and I'm waving with my other arm, and I'm realizing that that's a tentacle too, and what seems to be coming out of my mouth, I think it's the speech of my people, but they're reacting to me like I'm gurgling, and the only thing that I can do is take off my glasses and wave at them and say, I'm me. I'm the first officer. I'm First Officer Leanna Choi, the same one that you always knew, the same one who actually ate food that looks like probably how I look to you right now.
And I say, I am Officer Choi, and we're all supposed to wake up now and prepare for the boarding by these aliens. But is one of the pods actually stuck? And one of the crew members speaks up and says, yes, that is Mission Control Specialist Smithson, and his pod is not open. Can you help us with your tentacles? So I go over there with the tentacles, and I begin to fumble and fiddle around with the pod until suddenly I press the right button, and the pod opens up explosively and throws Smithson across the room. And the aliens say, I'd always hoped to experience a human podcast.
Oh!
Mission successfully.
Oh my God.
Wow, that one hurt.
Yeah.
That was
That's
horribly horrible. Good job.
Good job. Good job. As this dangerous podcast event occurs, an alarm sounds, a proximity alarm, and lights begin to flash in the hallways. And the ship mind speaks over the intercom and says, "Alien craft incoming. Looks like it's about to board. A boarding trajectory. 15 minutes."
And I stop my flailing around with the tentacles, kind of bemused and bewildered. And of course, I'm looking around at my crewmates who are just utterly, completely confused. And Runcible is sitting in the doorway with his head kind of cocked to one side, eyeing me quizzically. I say, "We've got to get this artifact and me off of the ship before the aliens come." And I start scrambling down the hallway, trying to get to a place where I can get out of the ship. Floundering, the tentacles have seemed to have been getting larger, and as they're going along, and they're very clumsy and sort of flapping, and I actually sweep a couple of people out of the way with a tentacle inadvertently, and then go, sorry, and keep on going. Ryka.
Okay, and then suddenly Dr. Runcible shows up and jumps onto me and injects me with an antidote, and suddenly I can feel my body reform into the shape it was. And Dr. Runcible looks at me and says, "Leanna, this is the third time this has happened this week." These aliens are very, very, very pesky. And I know that Dr. Runcible is making light because we've been in suspended animation. And I said, "Thank you for making me feel better. I know this is horrible." And Dr. Runcible looks into my eyes and says, "Let me just check and make sure. Do you know who I am?"
To respond to a question that I actually see on the does Runcible the pig have an MD or a PhD?
Actually,
Runcible has a
Dr. Runcible.
BLT.
Yeah, I love that. That's best.
So Dr. Runcible says this is the third time, Choi, and I say I'm really sorry, but I really get flustered when aliens are coming aboard the ship. You know that as the aliens enter, and there's nothing we can do to stop them. They're a superior technologically advanced culture. I think the best thing that we can do is just show them that we're friendly. And I think the best way to do that, Runcible, if you don't mind terribly being my emotional support pork right now, would you mind terribly if we spoon again? And we sort of melt into each other's arms and curl up into a fetal porcine little ball and comfort each other and make self-comforting noises. Oh.
You know, that's so cute that it's sort of hard to want to take our protagonist out of that soothing, warm state. But unfortunately, there's a blaring alarm of the klaxon. It's still going meow, meow, meow every once in a while. And you can feel Runcible. It's somewhat sensitive. It kind of twitches every time there is the sound of the klaxon. And his ears are kind of laying back as they.
Well, and you do feel a responsibility to make sure that Runcible and the rest of the crew, return to their home safely, because you do want to bring the bacon home safely.
And this is true. As the first officer, I do have a huge responsibility to these people. Runcible, the crew members, Mr. Fuzzy Pants, all the members here, and so I look at the artifact that has caused all this trouble so far, because I want to make sure my hand's not going to turn into a tentacle again. I'm like, I need a bag to put this artifact in. And so I reluctantly uncoil from Runcible and the fetal pig position and stand up looking around, because surely there must be someone here with a bag to put this in. Ryka?
And from the back, from my back comes the reassuring voice of the captain saying, you there, I think you need a bag for that device. And he comes over and he has this wonderful recyclable bag into which we put the device, and it's completely shielded from radiation, and this device is rendered momentarily inert. And he says, engineer, I need this analyzed as soon as possible. These aliens are about to come aboard at any minute now. So please do something. And he hands it commandingly to the science officer / engineer, Chris.
So I take this sack full of alien artifact and I bag it and I put it in the airlock and I eject it for the safety of the crew. And then I hear a voice coming through our own intercoms. They've managed to hack into the ship now. And they say, the alien voice says to us, it has been decreed that you shall be treated as you treat the artifact that we sent to you. Therefore, you must all now be sacked.
At this point, the entire ship shakes as the alien vessel docks with the outer hull, and the jellies begin to cut their way in. As you proceed, one of the characters you interact with must now tell a lie.
A crew member rushes up and says, everything's going to be all right. And
Perfect.
I nod, yes, certainly everything will be okay. We're both kind of staggering from the collision with the alien ship, and no, I say, the thing is that these aliens are tourists. So the thing that we've got to do is be as unexciting as possible. So everyone's got to be just boring. Put the pig away because the pig's kind of innately entertaining. Let's hide him. And everyone just look boring as you can be. Just get to your stations and just look like everything. Like this is daily. You don't even care. We can't bore the pants off of these aliens, so they just move on. Ryka?
Yeah, if Runcible's around, he'll hog the spotlight.
So we're all just trying to do our job, trying to follow these orders. And we are, because it seems like a good enough thing, and they dock and they show up, and suddenly there are all these slithering things, and they're about, and they come up to about our knees, maybe mid-thigh, and they're squirming around us, and we're trying to maintain our composure as we run the ship. And looking at the captain's actually petting one, and they seem to be communicating with each other. And it appears almost, in fact, it appears that this has all been arranged.
In fact, what's happening is a great big welcome party for the aliens, and it's a surprise welcome party. And we've had all these klaxons going off, and we've been shamed about our love of our pig. And we go and we see that in the mess hall, there's Runcible, the mastermind of the entire operation, and he is opening up the ovens in the mess hall and just preparing all kinds of pastries for the little squiggly guys and our crew to eat. And I can't restrain myself, and I say, Runcible, my God, what are you baking?
With a squeal of delight. I'm sorry, Chris. Did you want to, Christopher?
No. I got nothing. I anything I can say is inappropriate at this point.
I'm just trying to keep it PG.
I know. We're all really.
I know. It's just
Black Mirror episode 1. That's just all.
Healthy possibilities. All right. Anyway, with a squeal of delight, Runcible turns with a tray of cookies in his little trotters, and they are all tiny gingerbread aliens. which apparently we are going to feed to the aliens. And it kind of, everyone seems to be getting busy preparing for the party. And I'm a little bewildered by this, because how did I, Leanna Choi, first officer of this ship, not know any of this was going on? I'm starting to doubt my own senses. And I turn to the same crewman who originally said, this will all be all right, and say, but are you sure? Ryka.
And the crewman looks back and says, well, it was your idea anyway. You're the one who brought this artifact in the first place. Didn't you remember? And suddenly Dr. Runcible comes in with the alien artifact pulled from the sack and holding all the cookies in front of us and said, happy, welcome aliens. It's time for refreshments. Clicks the button, and all of a sudden, all of our consciousnesses get transferred into the cookie trays. And now we're lying flat, and we see our own bodies fall down onto the bridge under all the tentacles, and we have somehow had our consciousnesses transferred into the cookies. And the tentacle creatures look hungry.
And here they come looming over us with their great big wiggly shadows.
Huh?
And they say, people of Earth, this is just a little foretaste of what's going to happen to your entire civilization. In fact, I think the best thing that you could possibly do right now, considering that you're prone and you're baked goods, would be to acknowledge our superiority and surrender. And I say, yeah, eat me.
I mean, what a difficult situation the characters now find themselves in. But I suppose that's just the way the cookie crumbles. Let's see as this proceeds, if each of you can find a way to pay tribute to your favorite movie, and let the audience try to guess what it is in the chat.
So first I have to remember what my favorite movie. Well, okay. Wait, is it my turn?
Movie.
What?
It's your turn.
It is. Damn it! I suspect that.
So someone else can go if you want,
Someone else want to go while I try to figure out what my favorite movie is.
or a favorite movie.
A favorite.
Yeah, does it have to be a movie, or can it be like a TV show?
Sure, TV show.
Okay. And as they eat us, suddenly we all connect with each other and we say, we are the Vor. You shall be assimilated.
And then before I know it, they're producing milk to dunk us into and crumble us up. Here are these great big glasses of milk. And in fact, it's kind of weird, but as a cookie, I am offered milk. And being first officer, I think I'm a practical person. I need to know things. I say, hey, who's paying, how much is this milk going to cost? And they say, oh, you don't have to worry about a thing. And I just say, Lloyd, I'm the kind of guy who likes to know who's buying his drinks.
And Lloyd says, you'll never know. You'll never know where this milk came from. I've got a bad feeling about all of this. And so I try in my little feeble cookie way to sit up, to look at the milk, but I'm trapped. It's just trapped on this tray. And then looming behind the aliens, I see Runcible, who, having transfigured multiple times over the course of this narrative, is now 20 feet tall, has huge writhing tentacles coming out of his head, and he picks up the alien, slams them down, and says, no cookies today. It's your turn, Chris.
Oh, all right. So the aliens, now realizing that humans are not the only form of life on the planet, get a good look at Runcible and they've never really seen a pig before, and it just activates some panic mechanism in them, and before you know it, these aliens are just grabbing whatever they brought with them and taking a few pictures just for fond memories and getting the fuck off the ship. They are in full retreat, heading back to the ship, all because they caught a good look at Runcible. And I tell you what, I have never loved a pig more in my life.
But as they leave, here I am, still a piece of cookie and chocolate chips sitting in milk. And I don't know what's been going on here. And suddenly, as they leave, there's the vacuum of space, and it's cold. And there I am, sitting this milk and chocolate chips, and I freeze, and I scream.
but do you have a mouth with which to
I
scream?
have no mouth, but yeah.
I have no mouth, but I'm screaming.
I scream.
Near you, you see the artifact again. It's fallen on the floor. It's ignored at the moment. Maybe there some salvation can be found.
So I don't know if I'm supposed to. I'm gonna go. In my ice cream like way, I squirm and writhe and wriggle over to the artifact, which is really bizarre because you've never really seen ice cream kind of squirm and wiggle. It's actually a bit alarming for everyone watching.
Sounds a bit obscene, actually.
A little. Well, I told you we're trying to keep it PG, dude.
Yeah. They're tentacles here, and I'm Japanese. I'm really
trying. There we go.
Nice.
Get to the artifact and just sort of like enwrap it thoroughly. So now it's not just an alien artifact; it is an incredibly sticky alien artifact, which somehow attracts Runcible, who comes over, and now somehow it's Runcible, it's First Officer Leanna Choi, and it's the alien artifact all in one unholy amalgamation standing there.
And the alien artifact and Runcible and Leanna Choi all melded together in this sort of flux of dairy product, which is nourishing them. They form some kind of this growing ecosystem, and the will of Leanna Choi and Runcible to get home is in a battle of will with the remnant alien intelligence of the artifact. And they manage to take over the intelligence, and from the artifact comes a bunch of wires and tentacles that searches through the ship, and they manage to find an information port and dock with the ship intelligence and dock with the ship.
And of course, the ship intelligence, the ship mind realizes there's been a hideous faux pas. We've got a lot of people eating cookies and drinking milk and eating ice cream and melding together, and we've had guests over, and nobody has brought out a bowl. So the ship packs a big bowl full of marijuana and fires that up. And pretty soon, the aliens who were frightened of the pig come back. They make peace with the idea of the pig. And everybody, cookies, milk, aliens, everyone's just sitting around, just ganging out. And interstellar peace is achieved.
Well, I'm not sure if we can add much to that.
We've been looking for a closure bus for a while, Chris.
Well, I think that's a good note to end on, actually. Interstellar peace.
Interstellar peace. Cookies and interstellar peace.
Cookies and interstellar peace. I'm really not sure what my brain just went through right now, but it was fun.
Absolutely. The chat was on fire.
Oh, God.
I can only imagine. Well, Thank you, everyone, for that unique experience. I'll remember it for the rest of my days. Um, shall we do some Q&A from viewers?
Yes. So first question, since the prompt was from your favorite movie, let's see who we can guess. Will you share the movie that you were referencing?
Oh, I mean,
Star
that's,
Wars. Oh,
yeah.
sorry.
No, please go.
That's a problem with Zoom. Star Wars.
The Shining.
And then for me, yes, Star Trek. That's why I asked for a TV series. So specifically the one episode where, Picard turns around and he's got like a laser sight in his eye.
I am Locutus of Borg.
Locutus of Borg. Mm-hmm.
Fantastic.
I saw that when that aired, and it was a two-parter, and so you saw Picard turn around as a Borg, and then you had to wait 6 months to find out what happened.
Oh my God, I remember that. That was horrible.
It really was. It was a great cliffhanger.
Mm-hmm.
I have a question for Christopher, actually. I want to know, how did you come up with it's a gorgeous title, and I want to know how you came up with it. And particularly, I noticed there's a song. Did the song come after the book, I presume, or?
I came up with the title all the way back in 2006, I want to say, which is when I got the initial idea for the story.
Nice.
And I'm a huge sci-fi fan, as I think all of us are. And I had a number of, I don't think I've ever talked about this actually, I had a number of Babylon 5 novels. And there was one that had a slightly poetic title. And all of my previous novels were, one-word titles, Eragon, Eldest, that sort of thing. And I wanted a longer title that evoked the feeling that I was trying to evoke with the story itself. So To Sleep in a Sea of Stars, and then I wrote an excerpt from an imaginary poem around that.
Nice.
Later on in the course of actually writing the book. But to me, that title actually is the feeling I was trying to capture with the story. So there's, lots of aliens and lots of explosions and lots of character drama and running about, but ultimately it's kind of like that sense of awe of being out in the universe and the stars and the vastness of space.
Nice.
But
When I first hear, To Sleep, I immediately think Perchance to Dream. And then when you've got the Sea of Stars, it really makes a nice juxtaposition. It's a really beautiful title.
It's lovely.
actually, it was the end of Alien, where she's drifting off in space in the shuttle. They first gave me that sort of a feeling when I was growing up, and I actually loved that feeling. It was sort of bittersweet and creepy and eerie, and but I think we've had some great titles here today. I mean, the Blacktongue Thief and You Sexy Thing, and Light from Uncommon Stars. I mean, these are great titles. Great titles.
Well, and You Sexy Thing also brings to mind song lyrics.
Yep.
Yes, a number of people have said, "Oh, you earwormed me," and it's I think it's a good earworm, right?
Yes, absolutely. I have a question for the group, because many of you have started in different places, in different genres, in different categories, and that kind of thing. And I'm curious if you would share about your experience of making the shift, whether that's from poetry to science fiction, or YA to adult, horror to fantasy, and everything in between. I'll let you decide who goes first.
Chris, you want to take that one?
Sure. So I wrote 5 horror novels pretty quick succession with Penguin, which then became Penguin Random House. And I really, it's probably my favorite genre, but there's this thing that happens where it starts to feel, at least for me, it started to feel a little inauthentic to always go in that same direction. Like, all right, so I got this idea. There are these classic cars, right? And there's a family and they're traveling and they're going across the country, and then wait, something scary happens. Okay, wait, here's another one, you know. And so I was talking with my agent, and she said, you know, are there other genres you really enjoy? And I was like, I really love fantasy. And so she said, do you want to write a fantasy novel now? And I said, yes, I do. So that was the genesis of it. But it took a little while. There's a lot of world building involved. I mean, now four of my 5 horror novels were period pieces. So there was a lot of research involved. Between Two Fires, particularly, that one's about a new war between heaven and hell during the Black Death in 1348. So I wanted to immerse the reader in this hellish medieval France and make it feel real, but not bogged down. So fantasy doesn't involve research, at least not in the same way. But boy, does it involve a lot of invention, and I love invention. So this has been a lot of fun shift.
I think for me, I come from the literary side. I came out of the Cornell MFA program as a poet, and being queer and being person of color and all of these things, I always thought about using lit fic to sort of not have to deal with the day-to-day of being queer, and I've ivory towered myself away from that to a point, engage when I wanted to, but get away. But I think, as you said, Christopher, it can be limiting to be doing the same thing over and over. And I was touring and I was doing a lot of things that were expected. And, the books were great. I was in small press land, but coming to tour and working on Light from Uncommon Stars, even before puberty, even before I realized there was anything really that different about, well, I knew there's always something different about me, but even before all of that had a name, I was reading Asimov. I was reading Le Guin. I was reading Andre Norton. I loved Andre Norton's stuff. And so coming back, I was reading, R.A. Lafferty. I didn't know what the hell R.A. Lafferty was writing about, but I was reading Lafferty. And so coming back to science fiction and fantasy, I felt weirdly, I felt like it was an adult moment, that I could actually, I'd grown up enough to write the literature and the work that I wanted to write. Damn it. And so it's been, and the book, talking about research and things. Well, I had to learn how to play the violin to write this book. But besides that part, all the science fiction stuff, this was already things that I had been aching to do. And so for me, it was a real, to come back to science fiction fantasy, was an affirmation that, I'm going to be my own girl. I'm going to write, and there are going to be donuts and aliens, and damn it, if I want to put the devil in here, I will too. And Tor has been nothing but spectacular, and readers have been, well, some of them have been confused, but most of them have been okay with it.
Awesome. Well, I had written fantasy novels that are much more, I think, they're slower paced and they're more dreamy and they're more literary kind of an orientation. In this book, I just plain had fun. And it was just a ton of fun to write. And the second one was just as much fun to write. And I didn't mean to start the third one this month, but I did, because one of the characters came and was like, hey. So yeah, I love these characters in a way that I haven't with any other piece of fiction that I've written.
I mean, for me, I grew up reading as much sci-fi as fantasy, so I view them very much as, sibling genres. They do differ and they do different things, but in my mind, they're very, very similar. There's a lot of world building in both, a lot of invented scenarios and invented places and situations and all of that. So I feel very at home in both of them, both as a reader and now as a writer. I'm going to generalize broadly, and in fact, I had a bit of a disagreement with Brandon Sanderson over this, but to generalize broadly, fantasy is often, it doesn't have to be, but it is often a very nostalgic genre. And science fiction is often, and it doesn't have to be, but is often a very forward-looking genre. And I'm very curious about the world we live in, the universe we live in, existence itself. And science fiction is sort of an opportunity to write about that in a way, it lets me explore that in a way I can't actually do in the real world. You know, I can't get into a spaceship and fly to Alpha Centauri, but I can write about it and have some fun doing it, and hopefully readers enjoy it also. I will say that for me, the biggest shift, aside from YA to adult, because that really wasn't a big deal for me, because I wrote my YA books as best as I could at the age I was, and I wasn't really making a differentiation between YA or adult. It was just, this is the best version of this story I can do. But for me, the biggest difference was vocabulary. With fantasy, I tried to restrict myself more to period appropriate language. Didn't always succeed, but I tried. But that meant a lot, limiting myself a lot in my day-to-day vocabulary when I was writing the fantasy. And so it was like this purge of the fantasy to write science fiction, to have that freedom to use my everyday language. And then the other thing is the science, because you don't have to do this in science fiction, but I chose to do this, which was I wanted to respect the laws of physics and the discoveries we've already made while still allowing myself to do the things I wanted to. So I had to do a ton of research into finding ways to allow myself to have faster than light travel without time travel and things like that. And there is a certain rigidity that technology imposes, because a car can only go so fast. I mean, yeah, you can kind of push it a little bit, but really there's a top speed for a car. There's this top speed for a spaceship. Whereas in fantasy, if you need to get from point A to point B a little bit faster, you can always say they kind of spurred the horses on a little faster, or maybe you have heroic characters who manage to run just a little bit faster than they really should be able to. So that was an interesting restriction, but I think it led to some interesting storytelling choices.
Fantastic. Excuse me. Another Christopher asks, what are your thoughts about the lines between genres?
Who wants to tackle that one?
I don't know. Oh, go ahead. Go for it, Ryka, please.
I was just saying that, because my book does have a lot of science fiction elements and fantasy elements in there, I like to, if we mix them too much and we just blur the lines, the story's going to lack fun. Is going to lack a bit of depth that you could have had you preserved the lines. The lines are fun because you can cross them. If you blur the lines between vanilla sex and kink, then you don't appreciate the kink anymore. And kind of in the exact same way, part of the fun of having the different genres is transgressing the boundaries. Or to be able to do it in a way that is, that is recognizable, that, maybe you do that, somebody has, some sort of a realization that these are in some ways more closely related than we thought. However, I think that, we can't always just say that, the genres are, just, they don't really matter as much, even more so when I'm mixing genre, because I want people to see what I'm doing. And I don't want to blur everything. As Bob Ross might say, you don't want to be a mud mixer. You want to make sure everyone sees all the little colors on your happy trees.
Yeah, I see what you're saying with that. But I also think that, it's good as a consumer to know what you're getting into when you go to purchase a book. It's good, I'm in the mood for a horror novel. I'm in the mood for science fiction. I'm in the mood for fantasy. That's all true. But I also think that there are a lot of books that maybe don't fall neatly into one thing or the other, and they're hybrid books. I've written a couple of those myself, and I think sometimes I think sometimes books can be overlooked if they don't fit into those neat
Mhm.
pigeonholes, and that's I don't know what can be done. There's nothing to be done about that. It's just how it is. You kind of have to brand your book if you want people to find it.
Mhm. Absolutely.
A number of years ago, I was in a used bookstore and cruising the science fiction fantasy section and found a weird Western and was super thrilled because I love me a good weird Western. And I took it home and I read the first chapter and I was like, my goodness, the speculative element seems somewhat light in this book. And then I went through another chapter and I was like, this is not fantasy, and I was ready to pitch it across the room. And it was a perfectly fine Western, but I had gone in with expectations. And so I do think genre, one of the dangers of it is it sometimes does create expectations that are sometimes difficult to work around or work against.
Yeah, I mean, I do think too that sci-fi and fantasy are two of the most flexible genres, especially fantasy. A lot of things that are paired off from fantasy really ought to be called fantasy, like quite a bit of horror technically is fantasy.
Yes.
In science fiction, a lot of, military thrillers nowadays really are science fiction. You could look at like the last couple of Mission Impossible films are straight up sci-fi as far as I'm concerned. So, like if you're going to get pigeonholed in a genre, fantasy is like the best one to be pigeonholed in because, you want to write a Western, you want to write a Western or romance novel or a Napoleonic era historical novel. Great. Just stick a dragon in it. Great. You're good. Your fantasy fans will enjoy it and it'll probably be better because it has a dragon in it. But it's still of a type. I remember when The Historian came out, that was historical fiction, kind of, it was, essentially Dracula fan fiction, very well written Dracula fan fiction, and fantasy, but it's not really considered fantasy as such in a lot of circles. So, and then you have things like Star Wars, which is, fantasy sci-fi. One thing I definitely wanted to do with To Sleep in a Sea of Stars was to write sci-fi that was somewhat rigorous on the science side, at least to my taste, but still allowed me to touch on some of the mythic elements that I had in fantasy, because those are elements that I enjoy in any type of story, and I wanted to do it in sci-fi while it's still being sci-fi.
That kind of, you mind, Christopher, just what you're talking about, grounding it in with Light from Uncommon Stars. What I wanted to do was, because I was writing characters that were usually characters of color, characters who are queer, characters who are trans. For me, I wanted to get the social science right, which is why my book wasn't just these characters who happened to be trans. I had them go things to establish that there was this consistency and this reality to it. And when you're talking about how you use science, that's how I was using actually social science in exactly the same way. So when I did give them fantastic elements, I made it very clear that I was bringing these people with me, so you could not generify them, the way that they did with poor Ursula K. Le Guin and Ursi, where they took the protagonist and gave the protagonist blonde hair and blue eyes in one of those adaptations. And we have such a set idea of who our fantastic heroes are that as a writer who's writing something other than those heroes, we have to kind of really anchor the character development. So when we do make them captain of the starship, they don't magically morph into William Shatner. And so,
So this is sort of a question for everyone. Wouldn't you say that, because I think this is an interesting point, that when you have stories with fantastical elements, you really do have to find something to ground it, whether it's the behavior of the characters, whether I heard someone say something like, you have to get the small, simple things right, because everyone's familiar with those. If you get saddling a horse wrong, they won't believe in the dragons in your story. They're willing, readers are willing to believe in the dragons, but they're not willing to believe that you saddled that horse the way you wrote it, because you don't know what you're talking about when you describe saddling a horse, right?
I had in my book, my readers will accept that there's a bunch of aliens that show up in the donut shop, but if I get the violin wrong,
Well,
we are in deep doo-doo. So I really was so nervous. That's why I did most of my research work was bothering violin shops, and just smelling, making sure I got that right. Because if you mislabel what the soundpost is, or you call the rig, that's where they're going to get you, and they're never going to accept the space aliens in the donut shop. Yeah, so I think Christopher's completely right there. You have to get the small things right.
Yeah.
and I think along the same lines, those small things also have to involve sensory stuff. And that one of the things that really kind of makes the world come alive is when you're thinking about kind of how things smell and feel and all of that. And that if you know what the dragons smell like, they're much more real.
I struggle
The
with
sweat when you wake up from cryo sleep.
that. Yeah, I struggle with that. I'm intensely visual, and so yeah, I struggle to incorporate the other. I have to consciously remind myself. It's like, okay, what do things feel like? What do they smell like? What do they sound like? Because otherwise, partly because I nearly became a visual artist before going into writing, so I think my brain likes that.
Chris, will you introduce us to this new
Yeah.
member of our discussion?
We need to
Yeah,
know
this
Cat's
is,
name.
This is Jane, and I had to let her in because she was yelling at me outside the door, and I didn't want my speaker box to start lighting up as there was desperate meowing happening. So this is Jane.
Welcome, Jane.
She's a lovely cat. She's been around we've had her for about 3 years now. We think she's about 8. And she's great. I've got a stray down in the basement, heated basement now. We're trying to assimilate him, but they're not getting along. They're not getting along at all. So fur is flying. So it's a process.
Yes. Introducing new household members, I think, all the time is a process. Caro says, you've all got some really distinct, unique characters. When was the moment that they went from feeling like an idea to feeling like people that you'd like to write a book about?
Ooh, that's an interesting question. Boy, I don't know. Anyone else want to tackle this one?
I can tell you that mine were alive the minute I started writing about them. I sat down to write and I found I was writing about 2 people arguing about an eggplant, and it just went from there. It was crazy.
You have an eggplant in your book too?
Yes, it's important. All good
Yeah.
eggplants
Oh
have
my God.
eggplant in them.
Eggplant solidarity.
I hate eggplants. Hate them.
No, there's a whole scene where, my cursed violin, Queen of Hell takes the alien donut captain to an Olive Garden, and they have eggplant parmigiana, and it's like,
awesome.
yeah. I think it's a little, back to your question, I think it's a little things like that. When you see them start to play off each other, that's where you realize it's not just a cast of characters, there's a story involved. And once you go from there, I think it's all just, it's all fun from there. Except for the shitty parts. Pardon me.
Yeah, I think it's different for me with different characters. It's a very different process every time. They're such unique individuals. Sort of the way they animate is individual too. I know that there's a moment when a character can deepen in a way that makes you feel that person is more solid and more 3-dimensional than perhaps they were when you sort of get it about who that person is. And I'll be honest, in the Blacktongue Thief, there's a character who's a main character, probably the secondary character, and her name is Galva, and she's a veteran of these brutal goblin wars that humanity has been traumatized by, and she's Ispanthian, which is you know, a country that bears a lot of similarity to an Iberian country like Spain or Portugal. And when I first wrote the book, the very first version, Galva was a male, and as I was approaching the second draft, I was like, something's not right with this character. This character isn't speaking to me. It's not as three-dimensional as it should be. And because one of the themes of the book is that these wars, the first couple of rounds were so catastrophic that we lost huge pieces of the male population, and females had to go under arms, which did a lot of fun societal things. I was like, why not push this further? She's one who fought in the Daughters' War, the last war. And I'll tell you what, that changed everything. And where I was like, I'm not connecting with Galva in the first version, I came to really love this woman who found herself in this position. So, yeah.
I mean, I think for me, it depends if we're talking like main characters or more of a secondary or even tertiary character. If it's more of a character, not a main character, I think having a really strong eccentricity or physical description, something to really hang my imagination on, will help that character be come to life in my mind. And it's okay if it's a bit one note, because we don't necessarily see that person for very long. But for a main character, I usually have, I won't even try to write a story until I have some sort of sense of their emotional life and what's important to them and what they're going to be doing and what they care about. And that's kind of what drives a story for me. So if I have that, that's what makes someone start to come alive in my mind, because they're feeling something and I feel it. But the process isn't complete until I actually start writing. And then it's all those little interactions and the little eccentricities and the language they use and all of that. And then it's like I feel like I start to really know and understand this person. There's really no substitute for experience, and part of that is just the amount of pages you've piled up with a character and the amount of time you've spent with them. No matter how much world building and thinking I do before writing a novel, I will have a deeper understanding of them after 308,000 words and almost 900 pages. So there's just no way around that. That's actually one of the things that kind of surprised me writing To Sleep in a Sea of Stars, because it's introducing the setting of the Fractalverse, but it's essentially a standalone story. And I was not used to the demands of a more confined story. I'm used to being able to develop characters over multiple books, over multiple years. And that really kind of caught me by surprise. And I feel like I need to do more work and more novels on that front, because it's very different than when you're writing in a series and you can have a payoff in the next book or the book after that. It leads to a very different way of thinking and pacing. I remember when I read The Way of Kings by Brandon Sanderson, it really struck me how different the pacing of that book was compared with most novels, because he's pacing it for a 10-book series, and that's a very different thing to do than a short 200-page book that's a standalone.
Absolutely. Well, at the risk of self-serving the bookseller, I think we have time for one more question, and I hope it's an easy question. What are you all reading right now?
I have to look up the name of the author, so everyone go first.
I'm rereading the Expanse series because the 9th book is about to come, and I'm so excited. So I'm like on book 4 right now and kind of crunching through those. I'm very excited about that.
I'm reading. People have told me that with this friendship between the thief Kinch and the warrior Galva, that there are similarities with Fafhrd and the Grey Mouser, which I'd never read before.
Oh,
good.
So I just started reading Swords and Deviltry.
So good.
Yeah.
Shout out to Fritz. I'm right now rereading Kimi no Nawa, or Your Name, which is the Japanese sort of warp, reality thing going on. I just every once in a while I'll go back to a book like that and just remind myself what's possible with a very limited palette of fantastical elements. One thing that I don't want to do, because Light from Uncommon Stars covered a lot, and sometimes more isn't better. So I want to make sure with the book, just reminding myself that a good story is a good story is a good story, and how much power a good story has. And that's what I want to give to my readers.
Fantastic. Christopher, did you discover who the author is?
Yes. So I recently finished Dolores Claiborne by Stephen King, which I thought was a really interesting exercise. First person, it's all dialogue. I thought he did. I actually know someone who reminds me a bit of that character, Dolores Claiborne. So it was a really good read for me. But I'm currently reading a book called The Seville Communion by, and I'm going to pronounce this in the Italian fashion, but he's Spanish, Arturo Perez Reverte. And my parents enjoyed it and they recommended the book, and I'm quite enjoying it. So it's a bit of a murder mystery investigative novel, but it has some deeper themes as well. So
fantastic. So now hopefully our viewers
Cat?
know.
I did. I went.
That's right.
Thank
Yes,
you.
the advance.
Sorry.
So hopefully viewers, if you already have your copies of To Sleep in a Sea of Stars, Light from Uncommon Stars, The Blacktongue Thief, and you can all get You Sexy Thing tomorrow.
What you all should do.
Yes, absolutely. Christopher was saying before we started the broadcast that the tagline of Farscape meets the Great British Baking Show made it an auto buy. Same. So definitely pick up You Sexy Thing, or some of the other books that they have mentioned this evening. You can find all of those on countrybookshelf.com. There's links in the chat. I want to say a big gigantic thank you to all four of you for joining us this evening, for taking us on an amazing porcine tentacled adventure. And hopefully for book twos, we can pick up and see if our cookies regain legs, even hands, some other motility device.
That would be helpful.
Yes.
Return of the cookies. I like
That's
it.
right. Well, and
Tentacle cookies.
a big thank you to Country Bookshelf for hosting this event, and to you, our dear readers and viewers. We couldn't do this without you, so thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you very much for watching.
Very much.
Have a great night, everyone.